Clint Eastwood wasn't born a legend. He was born into poverty during one of the darkest periods in American history, the Great Depression. He wasn't born into Hollywood, didn't have a famous last name, and didn't ride into town with any connections. He came into the world on May 31st, 1930, during a time when families were losing everything: homes, savings, even hope. His family was constantly on the move, chasing work, chasing shelter, chasing anything that would keep them afloat. He slept in cars. He skipped meals. He watched his parents struggle just to survive another week. And from those early days, one belief cemented itself deep into his bones. If you don't make something of yourself, no one's going to hand it to you. That belief would drive a quiet, brooding man to become one of the most powerful forces in Hollywood history. But that success came with a price. This is the real story of Clint Eastwood, his rise, his empire, and the loneliness that followed it all. Long before Clint Eastwood's name lit up theater marquees, it was scribbled on school rosters that changed constantly. He was the new kid, always. His father, Clinton Sr., took whatever work he could find, bouncing between jobs as a steel worker and migrant laborer. The family moved so frequently that young Clint never stayed in one town long enough to form lasting friendships or feel any real sense of home. He once said, "We were always starting over." During these early years, money wasn't just tight, it was nearly non-existent. The Eastwoods often lived in boarding houses or cramped apartments. There were stretches where meals were sporadic and sleeping in the family's battered car wasn't a last resort. It was the only option. Clint grew up watching his parents stretch every penny and swallow every disappointment with quiet endurance. That silence, the kind that comes not from peace but from pressure, would become a defining part of who he was. In high school, Eastwood didn't fit into any particular mold. He wasn't the class clown or the football star. He was gangly, shy, and notoriously private. But there was something about his presence, an intensity beneath the surface that others sensed, even if they couldn't explain it. His teachers didn't expect much from him. Some even wrote him off. But Clint didn't need approval. He needed escape. After graduation, Eastwood worked a string of physically demanding jobs, digging swimming pools, hauling logs, and working night shifts in factories. He wasn't afraid of labor. In fact, he preferred it. Manual work was honest. It didn't require charm, connections, or polish, just resilience. And Clint had more of that than most. Then came the draft. In 1950, at the start of the Korean War, Eastwood was called into the U.S. Army. While he never saw combat, he was stationed at Fort Ord in California, working as a swimming instructor and military lifeguard. Ironically, it was this low-profile assignment, far from battlefields, that would put him on a collision course with destiny. But before that turning point came, life handed him one final test. A test not of skill, but survival. Fate doesn't always knock with a dramatic flair. Sometimes it's disguised as a near-death experience. In the fall of 1951, Clint Eastwood boarded a Douglas 80 bomber as a hitchhiking passenger, an unofficial military transport flight heading north along the California coast. Mid-flight, everything went wrong. The aircraft ran out of fuel and was forced to crash land into the churning waters near Point Reyes. Eastwood survived the impact, but survival was far from guaranteed. Alone, in the cold, gray Pacific, with no flotation device and no clear direction, he swam 2.5 miles, through freezing currents, against exhaustion, against panic, against death. Years later, he would say that during that swim, he realized the fragility of time. Not life, time. Life could be taken from you in a flash, but time, that was something you could waste. And he vowed, from that moment forward, never to waste another second. Back at Fort Ord, that brush with mortality hadn't made him famous, but it had changed him. And ironically, it was this low-profile military posting that gave Eastwood his first step toward the screen. While stationed at the base, he befriended Chuck Hill, who had Hollywood connections and saw something in Eastwood. His height, his jawline, and that unspoken presence. A quiet tension that simmered behind the eyes. Hill arranged a meeting. It led to a screen test. And while Eastwood's early performances were stiff, awkward, and heavily criticized by studio executives, Universal Pictures took a chance, putting him in a contract with bit parts in forgettable B-movies. Eastwood was aware of his shortcomings. He knew he wasn't a classically trained actor, and he didn't pretend to be. But he had one thing other actors didn't. He watched. Every director, every camera setup, every take. He studied it all like a man building something brick by brick. For nearly a decade, he drifted through the outskirts of Hollywood, waiting tables between roles, balancing disappointment with quiet preparation. He wasn't chasing stardom. He was building a foundation, one slow, uncertain job at a time. Then, in 1959, he walked into an audition for a new CBS television show called Rawhide. The role was Rowdy Yates, a hot-headed young cowboy. The producers weren't immediately sold. Eastwood was older than the character and far less expressive than the other contenders. But once again, that stillness, that unreadable restraint, did something unusual. It didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. He got the part. And just like that, after nearly 10 years in the shadows, Clint Eastwood finally stepped into the light. Rawhide was Eastwood's first real break. The Western series ran for 8 seasons and turned him into a household name. But while others would have been content with TV fame, Eastwood wasn't satisfied. He hated how long it took Hollywood to get anything done. Hours spent lighting a single scene, budgets ballooning out of control, endless talking. He wanted more control, more efficiency, more authenticity. Then in 1964, he received a call from Italy. An up-and-coming director named Sergio Leone wanted to cast him in a low-budget Western with hardly any lines. It wasn't glamorous and the paycheck was modest, but Eastwood saw something others didn't. A global opportunity. He took the job. The film was a fistful of dollars. It became a phenomenon, then came for a few dollars more. Then the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Man with No Name trilogy redefined the Western genre and turned Clint Eastwood into an international star. But that was only the beginning. In 1971, he introduced the world to Detective Harry Callahan in the gritty gun-toting crime thriller Dirty Harry. It became his signature role and a cultural icon. Lines like, "Do you feel lucky, punk?" are still quoted today. At a time when America was grappling with crime, war, and disillusionment, Eastwood represented a new kind of hero. Quiet, unshakable, morally complex. But Eastwood wasn't just interested in being in front of the camera. He wanted control behind it too. So he launched Malpaso Productions, his own film company, named after a creek in Carmel. This gave him something priceless in Hollywood: creative freedom. As a director, Eastwood shocked critics who once saw him as just a stoic cowboy. In 1992, he directed and starred in Unforgiven, a brutal, introspective Western that flipped the genre on its head. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Over the years, Eastwood's directorial catalog would grow to include Mystic River, Gran Torino, Letters from Iwo Jima, and $1 Million Baby, which earned him another Best Director Oscar. He became known for his no-nonsense sets, few takes, minimal drama, always on schedule. He treated filmmaking like a craft, not a circus. And outside of film, he was building an empire. He invested heavily in real estate, purchasing the Mission Ranch Inn, launching the Tahoma Golf Club, and buying up thousands of acres across California. He even served as mayor of Carmel by the Sea, a sleepy coastal town he helped preserve and shape. By his 80s, Clint Eastwood had achieved what very few do: total domination of his industry and complete financial independence. But while his professional life was soaring, his personal life was unraveling. Eastwood's first marriage was to Maggie Johnson. It lasted 31 years, but not without pain. The couple officially divorced in 1984, with Maggie receiving a reported $25 million settlement. But the cracks had been there for decades: infidelities, emotional distance, and long periods of separation. Then came his turbulent relationship with actress Sandra Locke. It lasted 14 years. They lived together, worked together, but it ended in one of Hollywood's ugliest breakups, complete with lawsuits, restraining orders, and emotional devastation. Locke claimed Eastwood manipulated her career and their personal life. She later wrote a memoir painting him as cold, incalculating, Her death in 2018 hit Eastwood hard. Despite the bitterness, there had once been love, and regret never dies quietly. In total, Clint Eastwood fathered 8 children with 6 different women: Lori, Kimber, Kyle, Allison, Scott, Catherine, Francesca, and Morgan. Some of them, like Scott Eastwood, followed in his footsteps as actors. Others lived quieter lives, sometimes estranged from their father. For years, Eastwood was emotionally distant. He provided, but wasn't present. Some of his children didn't even know he was their father until adulthood. In more recent years, he's tried to reconnect, spending time with his kids and grandchildren. But time, once lost, doesn't return easily. Then in 2024, Clint Eastwood faced one of the greatest losses of his life. His longtime companion, Christina Sandera, passed away. She had been his partner for over a decade, bringing a calm presence into his later years. Her death left Eastwood profoundly alone. Today, Clint Eastwood lives in Carmel, surrounded by vast properties, ranches, and the quiet calm of nature. He rarely makes public appearances. He no longer acts, and his directorial work has slowed. He's over 95 years old, a titan now watching the sunset. He lives in the stability he always craved, the permanence that eluded him as a boy. But for all the success, all the accolades, all the wealth and legacy, there's a lingering silence, the same silence he once wielded as his greatest strength, his weapon of stoicism, his brand of masculinity, has now become his only companion. He built an empire, he achieved immortality, but he also paid the price. Lost love, fractured relationships, and a profound loneliness that money, awards, and fame can't fix. Clint Eastwood didn't just play the cowboy, he was the cowboy. And like all great cowboys, he rides off alone. If this story gave you a new perspective on Clint Eastwood, the man behind the myth, consider hitting that like button. Subscribe for more deep dive stories just like this one, where we don't just show you success, we show you the cost of it. Explore more videos on icons, legends, and the hidden stories behind greatness. Thanks for watching, and remember, behind every legend, there's a price.